Corvex is currently the latest warframe added to the game, boasting a single focus on radiation to enable his kit. Beyond his nuclear reactor theme though, what does he actually do? I'm the Engineer, let's solve a practical problem. Corvex can be acquired from the market for platinum, or otherwise farmed only after completing the late story quest Whispers in the Wall, awarding you the main blueprint. This allows you to obtain his parts from Cavia bounties, with the neuroptics, chassis and systems in the tier 1, 2 and 3 bounties respectively. Alternatively, you can purchase components from the Cavia for standing, with each part blueprint priced at 20,000 standing, and the main blueprint, if you're getting a duplicate, costing 50,000 standing. The parts blueprints each require rank 2, while the main blueprint requires rank 4 with the Cavia. As the standing is obtainable from turning Invoker, with a minimum of 6,500 standing worth available in any mission with Voker spawns, you can skip bounties entirely in obtaining Corvex. For those who found the bounties, about 1 in 10 players will get all the parts from bounty drops alone in just 9 runs. If you instead run only the tier 3 bounty repeatedly with no Voker pickups, getting 3,000 standing a run, there's an 84% chance you'll have obtained the systems in the 14 runs it takes to get the 40,000 standing to buy the other 2 parts. This isn't counting the standing you need to rank up the syndicate itself, but the Voker from those runs should be sufficient to achieve that. The other 16% of players can run 6 more times and either get the systems naturally then, or have enough standing to just buy the systems anyway. Constructing Corvex is simple enough with most resources obtainable just in the course of farming for his parts. The only extra farm is a couple extra Argon crystals. With his acquisition out of the way, we can look at what he actually does. Corvex is a heavily armoured and high health warframe, giving even the channel favourite Lavos a run for his money. As such, he's a very resilient warframe, though he's also a slow one. Corvex's passive adds plus 3 meters of punch through to all weapons and his 4th ability. This means Corvex can shoot enemies behind cover or other enemies, seriously enhancing single target weaponry. His active abilities are where he brings in the radiation. Corvex's first ability is Trinka Pillar, where Corvex deploys an imposing pillar that emits pulses of radiation in a modest zone. Enemies caught in the zone will take radiation damage with a guaranteed status effect and a fixed 35% slow. Despite Corvex's passive, this zone does not penetrate any obstacles, only striking enemies with line of sight to part of the pillar. The damage it deals is low, and the slow effect is less than a single cold rock, making the core focus the radiation effect it creates, acting as a defensive zone. When the first enemy in a group enters the zone and becomes irradiated, its allies will likely stop approaching and turn to shoot it, rather than continuing forward to attack you. Corvex's second ability, Containment Wall, produces 2 long lines of heavy and radiated walls, slamming them together and crushing enemies into a line in the process. Once again, this applies a large number of radiation status effects, delivering them quickly rather than over time. Enemies caught in the wall are all lined up parallel to the walls, debuffed to take more damage permanently, and even opens up enemies for finisher attacks. This is broadly a grouping and opening ability, setting you up for other offensive actions. Corvex's third ability is Disometric Guard. Very simply, it provides you and your nearby allies status immunity for the next few status effects. It has a token effect of damage and knockdown nearby on cast, but that can be safely ignored. If Corvex gets a kill or assist on an enemy affected by a radiation status effect, both him and his allies with at least 1 Disometric Guard charge can regain a charge. This recharge has a 10% chance per active radiation proc on the killed enemy up to 100%, allowing for this ability to be cast once and then forever maintained. It also has no connection to your range stat, maintaining the effect within affinity range. As this only protects from status effects, this ability is entirely a defensive one, especially good at preventing magnetic procs and slash procs. Lastly then is Corvex's only true offensive ability, Crucible Blast. Corvex becomes invulnerable and emits a powerful beam in a long line where he's aiming. Your ability to turn drastically slows down whilst his ability is active. If you target one high level enemy, like this level 195 Elite Lancer, the ability seems to do, well, not a whole lot. If you target a whole group of level 195 Steel Path Bombard Xmas units, all of a sudden, it looks like the most powerful 4th ability in the game. Clearly, it needs some deeper explaining. Short version, the more enemies you strike with the beam, or the more enemies have radiation procs and are near to those struck, the bigger the chain reaction until you reach lethal numbers. Even just 3 or 4 enemies nearby can make it scale dangerously. Now let's see why this works. When an enemy is struck by Crucible Blast, it becomes volatile. After a random duration, up to a second, the volatile enemy will explode, dealing radiation damage to all nearby enemies. This explosion has damage fall off over distance down to nothing, but otherwise ignores all obstacles. Should the volatile enemy have any radiation procs on them when they explode, the damage is enhanced per radiation proc. After exploding, the enemy is no longer volatile. However, all enemies in range of the explosion who also have a radiation proc on them will then become volatile. This repeats the process of the enemy exploding after up to a second, passing the damage around. This again makes yet more irradiated enemies volatile, including ones that were previously volatile and have already exploded. The volatile condition can only be passed around 5 times, with the 6th explosion not making any new enemies volatile. However, as the explosions affect all enemies in range, the volatile condition can be applied more than 6 times in total. In this example, which I'm slowing down massively to see what's happening, a total of 18 explosions go off between the 4 enemies, despite only briefly hitting the first one with the Crucible Blast beam. The initial explosion spreads the effect to all enemies, then whenever one explodes with non-final volatility, it makes any others that are not volatile become volatile again. Only when all enemies are on final volatility will the spreading stop. These chain reactions aren't everything. The volatile explosions not only spread, they also accumulate the damage from each exploded enemy, stacking the radiation proc buff. If for example all targets have 1 radiation proc on them, the first explosion will deal 1 proc's worth of bonus damage, the next 2, then 3, then 4, and so on. With a large group of 10 procced enemies, that can instead cause a rapid escalation of 10, 20, 30, 40 times the proc damage. This can rapidly outscale any damage the beam itself was capable of on a per target basis, before even considering the AoE. Suffice to say, the explosions are doing the bulk of the work once enemies are tough enough to survive the beam. The downside to this is that a dead enemy can't become volatile. That might be one of the stranger downsides I've ever said in a video, but it's important. If you have a strong target surrounded by other strong targets, they'll keep becoming volatile and exploding ever harder until they all start dying or the volatility runs out. In a group of 1 strong enemy and a bunch of weak ones, however, the weak ones will die much sooner than the strong one, bringing the chain reaction to a disappointing halt. With normal gameplay having a veritable mix of enemies, including units as weak as Butchers and as strong as Xmas Heavy Gunners, this could become a noticeable issue if not addressed. A targeted defense strip helps immensely in flattening the enemy's spread of defenses, or you can use single target weapons to take out the surviving heavy units. So Corvex has his slow radiation pillars, his crushing radiation walls, his radiation recharging status blockers, and his targeting laser for a radiation bomb. Individually, his first 3 abilities are all utility or defensive, providing functions you can get elsewhere and often better. If you're going to use Corvex for more than hit points, it is all about his 4th. His 4th ability wants a neutral or better strength to keep a good starting damage pool, and then otherwise just range. With more range, closer enemies take more damage, and more distant enemies can still become part of the chain. His first and second abilities help with setting up enemies with radiation, both in their own ways, and both with their own drawbacks. Drinker Pillar can be set up at a distance to prime incoming enemies with radiation. This means that when you use your Crucible Blast, the range boosted explosions can reach those enemies and spread the chain effect very far. The downside to that approach is it requires duration to keep the pillars running, and the zones will cause enemies to approach your position much more slowly, affecting how easy it is to target them. Containment Wall can be used to radproc enemies on demand behind long lines of terrain. This has no use for duration, allowing you to dump that stat, but now you need to actively and somewhat precisely target enemies behind cover. After all, the ones that you can see don't need to be contained, as you can just hit them with Crucible Blast directly. Containment Wall is also a brief ability, making it an energy intensive support for Crucible Blast. Whichever you pick, I would suggest only keeping one of the 2 abilities. The other can be replaced through the Helminth system. As a basic setup of Corvex, I recommend using the Umbral set, Overextended and Augur Reach. This gives you slightly positive strength, maximizes your health tank, and gives a huge range on your abilities. The use of Augur Reach also provides some shields on casting, giving you additional defense through the Shield Gate effect. If you don't want to go full Umbral, normal Vitality and Steel Fiber will give you half the tank, and you can combine that with Transient Fortitude to have at least 95% strength. With the remaining mod slots, it comes down to how you intend to support your Crucible Blasts. Corvex has no healing nor damage reduction abilities, so using Adaptation to further mitigate incoming damage is a good choice. Combine this with either an Arcane for healing, or healing from a weapon such as the Life Strike mod on melees. Corvex is also going to need a lot of energy. This again is down to your preference, such as with Arcane Energize, Hunter Adrenaline, Xenoric, or Equilibrium if you're using a companion to generate frequent health orbs. Lastly, he performs much better if you can defense strip very strong targets like Xmas or Heavy Gunners. For this you can subsume on Tharos Strike for a cheap and quick armor strip with a bonus healing aspect on it too. Alternatively, you can use the Anira Operator Focus Ghoul to armor strip specific targets on demand. For a non-Umbral, non-energized build, you can put together something like this, requiring only 2 Forma to achieve. Molt Augmented will allow you to reach total armor strip with Tharos Strike once you reach 188 kills, which is just 2 minutes in a solo Steel Path survival. Any Crimson Archon Shards will make that sooner still. For an Umbral and Energized build, it will almost require an Umbral Forma to utilize all the mod slots. This enables a higher duration setup with a final slot open to your choice of flex mod, such as Stretch for yet more range. I have not gone that far as I personally am not investing an Umbral Forma into him just yet. You can get around using the Umbral Forma by applying Forma to the other slots, but this will limit any variation on the build due to the locked in polarities. For Archon Shards, I strongly recommend a couple of Zur Shards for maximum energy, an Amber Shard for starting energy in a mission, unless you're using Xenoric or Energy Restores, and then the remainder on Crimson Shards for strength. As much as the Topaz Shards exist for a multiplicative damage boost for ability damage against irradiated enemies, the strength boost will also give most of that bonus. What's more, it doesn't consume Amber Shards, and the Crimsons make it easier to reach full armor strip with Tharos Strike. With your chosen combination of energy support, healing and defense stripping, Corvex is brain dead easy to use on Steel Path. He can tank, spread scaling radiation explosions, and weaken specific high defense targets so they don't survive the nuclear assault. Without the defense strip, Xmas and Acolytes are extremely resilient against Crucible Blast, forcing you to rely on your weapons instead. Outside of Crucible Blast, Corvex's abilities are simply too mediocre. As a result, in missions where you cannot get good chain explosions going, Corvex himself will feel unimpressive. A radiation-themed Inaros, if you will. But when enemies are numerous and you need a nuke, his kit quite literally does that. I tested Corvex, like many frames, live over on Twitch, so make sure to drop by to catch more Warframe discovery as it happens live. That's all from me for now though, so as always, aim beams, cause booms, and fight well, Tenno.